The National Desk, America's News Now.
Right now, Tropical Storm Idalia continuing its path of destruction across the southeast, a record storm surge. Millions without power as new damage emerges.
We haven't had a storm take this path at this level since the 1890s to hit this part of Florida. So this is something that is a really big deal.
Mitch McConnell struggles to speak. The latest freeze for the minority leader now making his age a top headline. And more money in your paycheck, the new rule that could enable millions of Americans to be eligible for extra overtime pay. This is the National Desk, America's News Now. I'm Amira David. As we come on the air tonight, Idalia is making its way north from Georgia into South Carolina. The storm was just downgraded about an hour ago to a tropical storm level just as it moves north up the coast. In South Carolina, just south of Charleston, there are new warnings of a dangerous storm surge tonight.
Right now they're saying we're going to have a king tide tonight, about 8 or 9 o'clock of a 7.5 foot king tide, and then they're calling for about 3 feet of storm surge on top of that. So we're looking at, 10.5 feet of storm surge.
Idalia initially made landfall as a Category 3 hurricane in Florida, unleashing devastation along a massive stretch of the Gulf Coast. The extreme weather reportedly claiming the lives of 2 in Florida, killed in separate crashes while driving in heavy rain and 120-mile-per-hour winds. Those not yet to be confirmed, however, by the state as storm-related. Throughout most of the day, torrential rains poured over Georgia and South Carolina and continue to dump massive amounts of water all the way up the coast to the Outer Banks. And you can see it right there on your screen, the red there. That's at least 40%, showing a 40% chance of flash flood risks for the next 3 days. And take a look here. This is Steinhatchee, Florida, located on the Big Bend just south of where Idalia officially made landfall early this morning. The Steinhatchee River rose more than 9 feet in 2 hours. But as Florida took the brunt in the AM, President Joe Biden detailed how the response from FEMA would be widespread.
The impacts of this storm are being felt throughout the southeast, even as it moves up the eastern coast of the United States, affecting Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina. And we have to remain vigilant, and there's much more to do.
The ramifications of Hurricane Idalia has been felt in airports across the United States. Latest numbers showing 3,700 flights delayed. More than 1,000 canceled so far today. Health concerns return for Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell as he seemed to freeze up again during a press event with reporters in Kentucky today.
That's okay. What are your thoughts on running for re-election in 2026?
What are my thoughts about what?
Running for re-election in 2026.
That's
Did you hear the question, Senator? Running for re-election in 2026? All right, I'm sorry, you all. We're going to need a minute.
He paused for more than 30 seconds, but then recovered and responded briefly to a few more questions before departing. A spokesperson says he felt, quote, momentarily lightheaded, adding that he feels fine, but he will see a doctor before his next event as a precautionary measure. This a little over a month after the Republican leader froze in a similar way on camera on Capitol Hill. He's waved off questions about his health in the past, telling reporters he's fine. The 81-year-old senator has fallen, however, multiple times this year and suffered a concussion. How old is too old? That's a question many are debating right now when it comes to the presidency. At 80 years of age, President Biden is the oldest to hold office and now seeking re-election. Chief political correspondent Scott Thurman looks at both sides of whether or not age is only a number.
For an 80-year-old president asking for another 4 years, his age now a central conversation. Can Biden keep the pace needed for the job? A majority of voters aren't so sure. 77% of adults surveyed think Biden is simply too old to be effective for another term, much higher than the 51% who feel the same way about Donald Trump, who is 77. CNN pressing the White House about that concern this week.
Joe Biden's been in politics since before, literally since before you were born.
Back when we were marking the 1-year anniversary of the war in Ukraine, he went to Kyiv. And people were so impressed that he was able to be there and look strong.
I'm not
right?
saying he's not able to walk.
No, but you're talking about his strength, right? You're talking about how he's looking right now. That is.
And Republicans hoping to take his job are seizing on that.
A vote for Joe Biden is a vote for Kamala Harris. You know that, and I know that. There is no way that Joe Biden's going to finish his term. I think Kamala Harris is going to be the next president, and that should send a chill up every American's spine.
Fueling speculation Biden may not be on the ticket, a planned Fox News debate between current candidate Republican Governor Ron DeSantis against Democrat California Governor Gavin Newsom, who is not in the race, but mentioned as a potential backup for Biden.
You think it could be Newsom?
He's waiting in the wings. I think a lot of people are waiting in the wings.
In his soon-to-be-released book called The Last Politician, the author Franklin Foer citing unparalleled insider access when writing, his public persona reflected physical decline and time's doling of mental faculties that no pill or exercise regime can resist. The White House insisting that President Biden's drive is hard for the staff and even reporters to keep up with, and they dismiss all of this as just chatter. Amira.
Scott, you mentioned some of Biden's opponents. What about the Republican field here?
Well, if the field got to inauguration, so hypothetically, right, you have 4 Republican candidates who would be in their 70s when sworn in, 3 in their 60s. The youngest, Vivek Ramaswamy, would be 39 at that point.
All right, more to come on that. Scott Thuman in D.C. for us. Thank you so much. New York Attorney General Letitia James claims Donald Trump overstated his net worth by as much as, if not more than, $2 billion. This comes from a court filing today where James is asking a judge to settle in her favor on a $250 million civil lawsuit against Trump and his children before it goes to trial in October. Liable for defamation, add that to a list of headaches for Rudy Giuliani. Today, a judge ruled in favor of 2 Georgia election workers who claimed the former Trump attorney defamed them when he said they had tampered with the 2020 election results. The judge in the case said Giuliani's team had failed to provide necessary documentation to plaintiffs and ordered him to pay nearly $133,000 in sanctions for attorney's fees and for the plaintiffs. And Giuliani's lawyers called the decision a weaponization of the justice system. A civil trial date in the case now will be set in which more damages are expected to be awarded. Meantime, former Trump aide Peter Navarro can no longer argue executive privilege as a reason why he did not comply with a congressional subpoena to appear before the House Select January 6th committee. A federal judge denied Navarro's claim today, saying he did not meet the burden to prove he was protected. Peter Navarro's contempt of Congress trial begins next Tuesday. He faces up to 2 years in prison if convicted. 11 people were hospitalized after a Delta plane hit severe turbulence while flying from Milan to Atlanta. It was carrying over 100 passengers and 14 crew members. Both customers and crew members were among those hurt. The FAA is now investigating. New reports show hate crimes like the one in Jacksonville last week jumped in our nation's biggest cities last year. Increases that averaged 22%, surging to a record nearly 1,900 cases across the country. The report from California State University San Bernardino details that from 2021 to 2022, Chicago saw an 84% increase in hate crimes. Austin, Texas saw a jump of nearly 59%, and Los Angeles saw a 40% increase in hate crimes. Philadelphia, Houston, and New York all saw increases between 14 and 30%. And in the battle against America's drug epidemic, Narcan, the groundbreaking overdose reversal medication, has received approval for over-the-counter sales. The manufacturer has announced that shipments are now en route to various drugstore and grocery chains across the country. It's expected to hit store shelves as early as next week. The move is welcomed by public health experts who say it's a crucial life-saving intervention that can help combat lethal fentanyl, now prevalently seen in street drugs. Coming up, we will continue our coverage of Idalia, plus a close call at the home of Ron and Casey DeSantis in Tallahassee. Then millions more Americans could become eligible for overtime pay under a new rule, who it would impact, and what has to happen first. And then certain types of cars are being targeted across the country because of a social media trend. We'll explain after the break. Welcome back to the National Desk, where our Idalia coverage continues. Take a look at this here, a close call for the home of Ron and Casey DeSantis. This is the governor's mansion in Tallahassee. The First Lady tweeting out this photo of a 100-year-old oak tree falling on the home, sharing that she and her kids were there at the time, but thankfully are okay. Though more calm now, Tallahassee and other parts of Florida not spared from the storm's fury. And tracking it from beginning to end for us is the National Desk's Tanner Stewart. And Tanner, tell us what the conditions are like right now.
Amira, good evening. Tallahassee is very clear right now, and it has been for the last few days or so. We certainly saw some rain coming in when we were with you last night around 10 o'clock, and that carried on throughout the morning. Unfortunate what happened there at the governor's mansion, but that is very little damage that happened across the city. Now, as you head down Highway 98 toward the Big Bend area, that's where you start to see the damage continuously picking up. We were in Perry, Florida today, where trees, power lines covering the roadways throughout each neighborhood that you try to get in and out of. The residents there saying that they're hopeful that this wasn't much worse. Nonetheless, though, they're devastated.
At first, the wind was coming out of the west and all the trees were bending. And I was just sitting there in awe, and then I heard the roar.
Hurricane Idalia wreaking havoc on the small town of Perry, Florida.
We never had nothing like this. You know, we got trees down everywhere. We got power lines down, roofs off buildings. At the end of the day, how this look, it could have been way worse than what we expected.
Idalia is the first major hurricane to hit the area in almost 75 years. Born and raised in Perry, John Phillips watched as the storm rolled in, questioning if his hometown of just over 9 square miles could survive Idalia's impacts.
I really didn't think we could stand a Cat 4, but I mean, it's, as you see, it's devastation everywhere, and I don't think anybody has power here right now. It's scary. It's scary, but thank God, I hope there's no fatalities. I hadn't heard anything, but I hope there's no fatalities and nobody got hurt, and it's a blessing, you know, and I hope that everybody's okay. So I don't want to experience that again.
Governor Ron DeSantis announcing Wednesday afternoon more than 260,000 Floridians have their power restored, while crews work to restore another 250,000 impacted residents. Roughly 40,000 linemen are in the region, many already in the impacted areas.
And we saw many of those linemen traveling down Highway 98 today, along with Florida Highway Patrol and other first responders trying to make their way through. But as I mentioned, the highway there somewhat treacherous. There was downed trees, power lines everywhere, everyone taking it very slow as of this morning.
Yeah,
Mira?
but you could definitely hear those folks very, very grateful because, as you said, it could have been a lot worse. Now, for the hundreds of thousands without power, when are they expecting to get that back up and running?
Well, I can tell you about Perry. Amira is a very small town. You know, it's less than 10 square miles. So they're hopeful with it being a small population, they can get it restored quickly, but they're not the only small town. We're hoping to bring you an update tonight on just how many were without power. But as we had just mentioned there, it seemed the whole town was wiped out as of this morning.
Hoping very soon and just thankful that everyone is okay. Tanner Stewart live in Tallahassee, Florida. Thank you so much. The U.S. economy expanded at a 2.1% annual rate last quarter in a revised estimate down from the original 2.4%. The new number is higher than the first quarter 2% annual growth rate, and it shows the economy is still growing in spite of the Fed's interest rate hikes to curb inflation. U.S. job creation, that slowed more than expected this month. ADP reports private employers added 177,000 jobs compared to the 371,000 added in July. Economists were expecting 200,000 jobs to be added in August. The smaller job report comes as investors and economists are split on whether inflation can continue to trend down with significant slowdown in the economy. And U.S. pending home sales went up by 0.9% in July, increasing for the second month in a row. That's according to new data from the National Association of Realtors. The number was higher than a market expectation. That being said, there was a 14% drop year over year. 3.6 million more Americans could soon be able to get overtime pay. The Biden administration has proposed a new rule that would require employers to pay overtime to white-collar workers making less than about $55,000 a year, up from the current amount of around $35,000. The rule will go through a public comment period. The Biden administration also announcing today they are forgiving $72 million in student debt for more than 2,300 borrowers who attended Ashford University. The United States Department of Education said the online for-profit institution made substantial misrepresentations to students between 2009 and 2020. The Biden administration has now canceled more than $116 billion in student debt, and the president pledges to continue to try and reduce debt burdens. South Korea says North Korea launched a ballistic missile towards the east today after the U.S. flew at least one long-range bomber to the Korean peninsula as a demonstration of force. The U.S. has been holding field exercises with South Korea. Earlier this week, North Korean media said Kim Jong-un called for increased military readiness. And this news comes as the United States says Russia has reached out to North Korea for munitions help in its war against Ukraine. Intelligence shows Russian President Vladimir Putin and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un have exchanged letters. The White House emphasizes any arms deal between Russia and North Korea would directly violate a number of United Nations Security Council resolutions.
We urge the DPRK to cease its arms negotiations with Russia, and we are taking action directly to exposing and sanctioning individuals and entities working to facilitate arms deals between Russia and the DPRK.
The White House points to Russia's attempts to acquire weapons from places like Iran and North Korea as a sign of weakness. Jean-Pierre saying Moscow is turning to, quote, rogue regimes like North Korea due to the success of U.S. sanctions and export controls. Well, the U.S. government wants to stop an expedition to the Titanic. RMS Titanic Inc. is based in Georgia and owns salvage rights to the shipwreck. The firm plans to explore the wreck next May, taking pictures and recovering some freestanding artifacts. But the government, it says federal law and an international agreement say the wreck has to be treated as a memorial to the more than 1,500 people who died. There is new research today on what are being called protective foods for your heart. Medical reporter Liz Bonus shares what's on the list.
Hey there, hello to you. It may be as simple as picking up a few extra foods at the grocery store. This study found if you don't consume 6 key foods, you have a higher risk of something going wrong with your heart. Many of these key foods have been part of Lafa Samu's diet for years after she realized she had a family history of heart disease.
My brother actually died of a massive heart attack about 23 years ago. He was 39 years old at that time, so too young to die.
But in addition to family history, Dr. Santosh Menon, a preventive cardiologist at Ohio's Christ Hospital, says a number of other health choices do influence heart disease risk.
Diet, exercise, reducing stress, getting enough sleep, those are things that prevent heart attacks.
In this study, researchers were specifically looking at eating what they called protective foods for your heart. They found not getting enough fruits, vegetables, legumes or beans, nuts, fish, and dairy food as part of your diet overall is associated with a greater risk of having a heart attack or stroke. As for how to include these foods, it varies a bit, but the averages associated with the best protection include 2 fruits, 3 vegetables, about a handful of nuts or a serving of beans, and a serving of dairy each day. Fish is suggested about 3 times a week, and whole grains and other unprocessed meats are also considered options for daily substitutions. Now, they also found the key to this heart-healthy diet is moderation, meaning not overeating, even on the good foods. That's linked to a healthy heart as well. I'm medical reporter Liz Bonus. Back to you.
Liz, thank you. Up next, the social media challenge that's putting specific car owners at high risk. We'll be back. We have reporters all across the country in your neighborhood covering issues that matter to you. We're taking the pulse of America.
Caught on camera, the moments Pedro Torres takes off from his front yard after he saw the people in a white car driving by get out and start smashing the window of his car. It was parked right in this corner on Dewey and Dakota Avenues in Fresno. Moments before that happened,
I see a car just flashing, speeding by, makes a quick U-turn, comes back, yells some profanities, tell my neighbors to watch out for their Kia. I was a little bit shooken. I was like, I don't know what that means.
He says they also mentioned
something about Kia boys.
The only thing is, Torres' car wasn't a Kia, but Torres says it also happened to one of his nearby neighbors who does own a Kia down the street too, 10 minutes before they hit his car.
He met me, saw me here, and he was like, oh, did they break your window? I was like, yeah. He's like, oh, they just broke my daughter's car too. He said he actually saw them inside their daughter's car.
Torres says he later learned from officers about the Kia boys, the TikTok trends showing teens going around and stealing Kias for fun and taking them on joyrides. Through the back roads in Winifred lies Fields Creek Road. Families now sorting through what's left of their homes to see if they can salvage any items. The area now holds debris and mud, homes pushed off their foundation in the devastating aftermath of Monday's flash floods.
We was trapped, so we just took the chance of carrying our kids and went out in the water and went next door. Luckily, our next door neighbor let us stay, but it was scary. I mean, it was over my middle child. He's 8 years old. It was almost over his head.
In 2021, Heather Octay and her family found a community in Dripping Springs, Texas, where they wanted to put down roots. They planned to build a 5-bedroom house in the Esperanza development with builder Buffington Homes. But 6 months later, they learned the builder had been acquired by another company, that their contract was being canceled, and that their money would be refunded.
Having to tell my kids that we were moving to a place that we had promised them, that we had invested in, that they were counting on. And it wasn't just a disappointment to us. It felt like we had let our kids down too.
Another family got the same notice. An Austin real estate lawyer says he's familiar with the problem and says to be on the lookout for clauses letting builders walk away. Coming up, how a rare celestial event tonight could dramatically increase the impact of Idalia. We are back in 90 seconds. The sky will look a little bit brighter than usual tonight because of a rare super blue moon. It's a combination of a supermoon and a blue moon and the biggest full moon of 2023. It could also be worsening flooding from Hurricane Idalia as the strong gravitational pull raises tides. NASA says super blue moons only occur about once every 10 years. The next one won't be until 2037. The moon isn't the only celestial highlight tonight. The glow of Saturn will also be visible. Starting around 8:45 p.m., Saturn will appear to move clockwise around the moon for the night. Happy Saturn sightings, right? Well, join us again tonight for continuing live team coverage of Idalia. On this evening of the National Desk, you can check your local listings. I'm Amira David. Thanks for watching.